They say don't wear white after Labor Day, but I've always been a bit of a fashion rebel. If you were an Edwardian in the summertime, or a historical fashion fan in 2025, there's one style of fashion that always comes to mind when you think of summer. Floaty, lacy, diaphanous lingerie dresses. They were immensely popular between 1900 and 1920, with the most iconic styles being between 1900 and 1910. I've admired these lightweight, lace-bedecked dresses for positively ages, but it wasn't until Bernadette Banner made her Mary Poppins Jolly Holiday dress that the notion of having a wearable one of my own entered my thoughts, which goes to show how long I've been planning and gathering materials since she did that project like 3 to 4 years ago. Who knew it would take so long to gather enough lace in the right historical style and shade of white? But here we are. Summer is just about over, which seems to be the story of my sewing life. I finish a seasonal project on the tail end of said season. But the weather is still lovely, so we're going to enjoy it as long as we can. Diving into the design of the project, historically, lingerie dresses could be bought at department stores or made at home, and so the styles and details are pretty much limitless. I knew I wanted my dress to be rather lacy, but I also wanted to be able to wear it to church on a Sunday morning without looking like I'm wearing a costume. That meant as much as a poofy, floofy, super gathered option like Bernadette did would be awesome, I wouldn't actually get as much wear out of it that way. I mean, people at my church know that I sew cool stuff and have an eccentric dressing style, but there's a time and a place. It would end up becoming a only for special costuming events piece, and I want a more wearable option. I also cheated a little bit in my design. Typically, lingerie dresses were all one piece, but lingerie blouses also existed as separate garments. And your girl loves a good capsule wardrobe, so I'm making a separate blouse and skirt and tying the whole look together with a dip waist belt, which was popular in that era. That way I can have my dress and wear it too. I can wear the blouse with my other walking skirts. I'm not just limited to a single garment. Overall, my inspiration comes from 2 pieces. The skirt portion was inspired by this dress from 1908, and the top half was inspired by this blouse from an undetermined year, but likely pretty close to 1908. I also referenced some of the construction techniques from my own extant lingerie dress that I found at an antique mall last year. For fabric, I bought a whole bunch of cotton lawn from Renaissance Fabrics, as you want as lightweight a fabric as possible. Lawn or voile were and are popular options, although I am still sad that with our modern advances we can't produce something as delicate and fine as Edwardian lawn. Seriously, look at the difference between these two. My lace was a 3-year saga of collection. I scoured the internet for insertion laces, and it is mind-blowing once you know the kind of styles to look for to see how many laces being made these days are so obviously modern designs and blatantly polyester. I wanted cotton lace as much as possible, but settled with nylon blends if they looked close. If I hadn't cared about the lace, this project would have taken way less time. But a lot of modern designs are really jarring compared to vintage lace or vintage-inspired lace. So between multiple sellers on Etsy, M&J Trimming and East Coast Trimming in New York, and 2 spools of glorious vintage lace that I bought at the Caftcad wardrobe sale, thanks again, Joanna, we're ready to make a lingerie dress. The beauty of lingerie dresses is that you're not just limited to using one lace at a time. You can combine laces together to make your own unique design, which is what I did for the vertical stripes on the skirt. Once I had decided how long I wanted the base skirt to be, I cut strips of 2 laces and stitched them together by hand. And this can have a functional purpose as well as aesthetic. I really wanted to use this lovely fine lace, but any strain on it made it warp, so I couldn't really use it on its own. So I used another thin lace to add structure while keeping the original feel. This also means it genuinely is a one-of-a-kind look. For the skirt base, I used my trusty walking skirt pattern, but only cut part of the way down. I also added a bit of extra width to the back panels as I wanted extra gathering in the back. And I couldn't make an Edwardian project without using my antique sewing machine, could I? The back panels get French seamed together, as they are the only seams on the skirt that won't get lace added. And antique machines don't have the backstitch feature that modern machines do, so if you see any puckering or me holding down the fabric, that would be why. I pre-folded the seam edges of the skirt before adding the lace, as it made for a much cleaner stitch line, and then stitched right along the edge. I thought that 1/4 inch seam allowances in quilting was slim. This is even slimmer. We're talking a couple of millimeters of seam allowance here. And after the lace was sewn on, I went back and stitched just along the edge to help hold the fabric in place. And thread chicken is so satisfying, especially on a machine like this. Then I let the skirt hang for a few days. Since a lot of the seams are cut on a bias, hanging them will let any stretch in the seams work its way out. Once the bias has stretched, I trim the bottom edges so they're all the same length. And the first horizontal lace gets sewn on. I'm doing this from the wrong side, which might seem counterintuitive, but it actually gave me a more accurate stitch line, and the lace didn't catch at all. It's time to make some pin tucks. I measured out one big strip of lawn, French seamed the edges together to make a big loop, and then began the long process of making tucks. Because my antique machine also doesn't have seam line markings, I added a little strip of post-it note to make it easier to set the width of the tucks. And I made sure to press each row of tucks before moving on to the next one. And this is why it's nice to have a backstitch feature. Once the strip was done, I joined it to the bottom edge of the horizontal lace. I did not film my absolute rookie mistake, whereby I went to add on these strips of Pintex and discovered it was significantly shorter than my initial measurements had called for, and then realized that despite leaving a note for myself to include them, I had forgotten to account for the width of the vertical lace strips in the circumference of the hem. Yeah, that'll do it. But thankfully I was able to make up and add in a little extra section of pin-tucked fabric, and nobody will be the wiser. Except the entire internet now that I've told you. Then we add on the next horizontal lace. I absolutely love this one. I think it's one of my favorites. And finally, a long straight piece for the bottom hem. This was also made into a large loop, and I folded the edges in narrowly and then folded it in half before joining the whole thing to the lace. I also wanted some vertical pin tucks to both add to the aesthetic and keep floof at the bottom but a tailored style at the top. I made a quick little placket for the back seam before adding on a narrow waistband. The base of the waistband gets sewn on by machine and finished on the wrong side by hand. I added a hook and bar to the back for closure, and it was time to move on to the bodice. This bodice took about 4 mock-ups to get right, but finally, I was happy. I figured the sleeve design would be the easiest to start out with, so I played around with what I wanted until I was happy with that. Then I basted everything in place for extra security while stitching. I also did a quick narrow hem at the cuff before tackling the lace. This is the part that's nerve-wracking about working with insertion lace. To give that see-through effect, you have to cut open the underside of the fabric, but the effect it gives is stunning. And once it's cut open, you just fold back the raw edges and stitch them down. I went from the wrong side again to make sure I caught the narrow hem edges. And then the sleeve can be seamed. I just did a basic sort of rolled hem to secure the raw edges, but when I went back and looked at my extant dress, it turns out that French seaming was pretty common across all the seams. Lessons learned. I ran a gathering thread along the marked points for the sleeve gathering later on, using a strong but smooth silk thread. I needed some more joined lace made up and decided to try using the machine, and to my surprise, it worked remarkably well. Then it was time to work on the bodice lace, and this was the part that had intimidated me the most. I also decided on a whim to include a lace yoke and stitched a bunch of strips of lace together to fit at the center front. Then I could start sewing in the other laces in the same manner as the sleeves. Stitch, cut open the underside, fold back, stitch again. And I only put the front vertical strips down part of the way, as there will be a drawstring channel added later, and I didn't want the cord to snag or wear down the lace. It was getting pretty exciting at this point, getting to crisscross laces and make these cool designs. For this centerpiece, I didn't cut the vertical lace behind it, as I didn't know what it would do to the overall structure of the garment. The center front edges get whip stitched together, and then the yoke got sewn in by hand. I trimmed off the backing fabric behind the yoke, and then secured the final seam edge before trimming the excess lace. I wanted a little extra pizzazz at the front, so I added 3 more rows of chevrons down the middle. And then sewed on a narrow channel made from leftover strips of lawn before threading it with a narrow twill tape. I thought the back needed a little something more as well, so I added what was left of the center front lace. Finally, the front and back could get joined together at the sides and shoulders, and these I did with French seams. The sleeves got pinned in, and I sewed them in place by hand with little back stitches and strong silk thread. Then, to finish the collar edge, I added a row of narrow lace. And I thought this one row would be enough, but skipping ahead to when I did my final try-on, I found the yoke was sitting too wide around my neck, so I ran a gathering thread along the top edge of this lace and added an extra row of lace to be the top of the collar. This ended up working out really well and making the final result just that much better. Lastly, it's time to add buttons, and for the technique I turned once again to my extant dress. The buttonholes were sewn on just one layer of fabric, while the buttons were sewn on 2 layers, so I decided to do the same thing. I marked out where I wanted each buttonhole and made little bitty whip stitches all the way around. And I used the tried and true method of putting pins at each end of the buttonhole before cutting it open to make sure they are exactly as long as you need, and so the seam ripper doesn't go any further than I wanted it to. I have these really cute little shell buttons in my stash, and this felt like the perfect project for them. I used the same strong silk thread I used for the buttonholes and stitched them on. It's done! It's finally done! It feels so weird that it's actually done after planning it for so long, but I love it. I have never felt more Edwardian in my life. It's so lacy and swooshy and elegant and awesome. I feel like I stepped out of a Lucy Maud Montgomery story and should be reading Lady of Shalott while waiting for Gilbert Blythe. A couple of teenage girls asked if I was doing a wedding shoot when I was filming the reveal, and they loved the dress and the idea that I make things to wear just for funsies. It is a little bit intimidating to wear, as some of the laces are so fine. There's a little side of me that's scared I'm gonna tear it if I move funny, but it absolutely ticks all my boxes for a lingerie dress. One side of me still wants to make one someday that has the full train and big, poofy Lucy Honeychurch meets Anne Shirley puffed sleeves, but that is another project for another time. And realistically, this style is much more me. And I am so glad that I made it as a two-piece option rather than one single dress. Again, can get way more wear out of the pieces, and I wager if I hadn't told you it was two pieces, you'd never know. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this sewing journey. If you did, please hit the like button, and if you want to see more videos like this, please consider subscribing. If you want to support the channel and future sewing endeavors, I do have a Ko-fi page, and I will see you all soon for more geekery meets history sewing adventures. Future sewing endeavors, I do... lingerie dresses. Really, Ruby? When you say someone you love, or see diamonds in your I pray that you don't forget me. 1920. They were immensely popular. Really? Are you playing with your toys while I'm trying to record? Can you say hi to the internet? Such a good noisy brat. Yes! Yes, you're a good noisy brat.